Ottomans to rise above the rest? How did a small band of warriors, led by a man named Osman, manage to outmaneuver and outlast rivals far more powerful than themselves? It's a tale woven from ambition, strategy, and the ever-changing tides of history. In the face of adversity, these early Ottomans carved out a path that would eventually lead them to glory. From nomads on horseback to rulers of a sprawling empire, their story is one of determination and vision. A vision that would reshape the world. Welcome to ASMR History, where I explore the echoes of the past in gentle whispers. Today, we'll embark on a journey through the rise of the Ottoman Empire, a story that begins with a flicker in the darkness and grows into a powerful flame that would burn bright for over 6 centuries. Join me as we delve into the early days of this empire, discovering the pivotal moments and key figures that helped shape its incredible rise. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more immersive and relaxing journeys into history. You'll be transported to different times and places where the past comes to life in a whole new way. Now, as we begin our story, it's crucial to understand the roots from which the Ottoman Empire sprang. The foundation of this empire is not just a matter of dates and places. It's a story of a man and his dream. Osman I, a leader who saw beyond the horizon of his own time, laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most formidable empires in history. His leadership during these early years would set the tone for the Ottoman state, shaping its character and destiny. Let's step back to the year 1299, to a time when the world looked very different and the first seeds of the Ottoman state were sown. Anatolia, at the close of the 13th century, was a land in turmoil. The once mighty Seljuk Sultanate had crumbled, leaving behind a fractured landscape dotted with small, struggling principalities. The Mongol invasions of the region had shattered the Seljuk state, spreading chaos and instability. Mongol warlords roamed the lands, leaving destruction in their wake, and the central authority that had once governed the region had all but disappeared. It was a time of uncertainty and opportunity, a power vacuum waiting to be filled. Historian Halil Inalcik aptly noted, the Seljuk state had crumbled under the pressure of Mongol invasions, leaving behind a power vacuum. And it was within this vacuum that a new force began to stir, the Beylik of Osman. Amid the chaos, local Turkish warlords, known as Beys, rose to prominence, carving out small dominions in the wake of the Seljuk collapse. These Beyliks were scattered and disorganized, each ruling a fragment of what had once been a cohesive empire. Among them, one man stood out, Osman I. His name would one day be known across continents, but at the dawn of his rise, he was merely the leader of a small, modest principality on the frontiers of Byzantine territory. Yet, it was here, in this turbulent region, that Osman laid the groundwork for what would become one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. Osman's path to power was not paved by birthright or wealth. He was born in 1258 into a world of uncertainty, where survival depended on one's ability to adapt and lead. From a young age, Osman showed an aptitude for leadership, honing his skills in the rugged terrain of Anatolia. The son of Ertugrul, leader of a small Turkish tribe, Osman inherited his father's position and ambitions. But Osman was not content to rule over a small domain. He had a vision that stretched far beyond the horizon. Osman's leadership was marked by his ability to capitalize on the weaknesses of his enemies. With the Byzantine Empire faltering, its outposts isolated and vulnerable, Osman employed guerrilla warfare tactics to expand his territory. His raids were swift and decisive, catching the Byzantines off guard. Historian Andrew Wheatcroft described Osman as a master of asymmetric warfare, choosing his moments to strike against the weakened Byzantine outposts. Osman understood that to build a lasting empire, he needed to be strategic, striking where his enemies were weakest and avoiding direct confrontation until the time was right. One of Osman's most significant early victories came at the Battle of Paphius in 1302. This battle marked a turning point not only for Osman but for the fledgling Ottoman state. The Byzantines, already weakened by internal strife, sent a force to crush Osman's growing power, but Osman, ever the tactician, lured the Byzantines into a vulnerable position near the Paphius River. There, he and his forces struck with precision, routing the Byzantine army and sending a clear message. The Ottomans were not to be underestimated. As Wheatcroft wrote, it was here, at the banks of the Paphius River, that Osman first tasted the fruits of conquest. The victory at Paphius solidified Osman's reputation as a formidable leader. It also signalled the beginning of the Ottoman expansion, as more Turkish tribes and beyliks rallied behind his banner. Osman's ambition was not merely to accumulate land and wealth. He sought to establish a lasting legacy. He saw the instability of the Byzantine Empire as an opportunity to grow his fledgling state, and he wasted no time in seizing it. Osman's early campaigns were not grand conquests in the traditional sense. They were, however, carefully calculated raids and strategic moves that allowed him to build alliances and gain control over key territories. He used diplomacy as effectively as he did warfare, negotiating with other Turkish beyliks and forming strategic marriages to solidify his power base. Over time, his principality grew in size and influence, transforming from a small frontier beylik into the foundation of what would become the Ottoman Empire. Osman's vision extended beyond his lifetime. He understood that to build a lasting empire, he needed to ensure that his successors would carry on his work. His son, Orhan, would eventually take up the mantle, expanding the Ottoman state further and solidifying its presence in the region. But the groundwork had been laid by Osman, whose leadership during these formative years established the principles and strategies that would guide the empire for centuries to come. As we reflect on these early years, it becomes clear that Osman was not just a man of war. He was a man of vision. He recognized that the political and social upheavals of his time presented a rare opportunity, and he seized it with both hands. His leadership, marked by strategic brilliance and a keen understanding of his enemies' weaknesses, laid the foundation for the Ottoman state. stretch across 3 continents began with the dreams and ambitions of a single man. But what drove Osman and his successors to continue their relentless expansion? What ideals and beliefs fueled their desire to push ever further into new territories? To truly understand the Ottoman rise, we must delve deeper into the ideological foundations that guided their conquests. The rise of the Ottoman Empire was not just a story of military might or clever tactics. It was deeply rooted in a powerful ideology that fueled its relentless expansion. At the heart of this ideology was the role of Islam, a guiding force that shaped the identity of the early Ottomans and gave their conquests a divine purpose. For Osman and his successors, the dream of empire was intertwined with the dream of spreading and defending the Islamic faith. This spiritual mission, combined with the determination of Ghazi warriors, created a potent force that would drive the Ottomans far beyond their Anatolian borders. The Ghazi warriors were not merely soldiers, they were the torchbearers of Islam, fighting on the frontiers to protect and expand the faith. In the tumultuous region of Anatolia, where the Christian Byzantine Empire clashed with Muslim principalities, the Ghazis saw their battles as part of a greater cosmic struggle. Their purpose was clear: to carry out jihad, a holy war in defense of Islam, and to bring the light of the faith to lands still under non-Muslim rule. Historian Halil in Al-Sikh captures this sentiment perfectly, writing, "The Ghazi warriors were not merely soldiers, but protectors of the Islamic faith, their swords guided by religious conviction. This religious conviction provided a powerful sense of unity among the scattered Turkish tribes that Osman sought to rally under his banner. As a leader, Osman understood that military strength alone was not enough to build a lasting empire. He needed something more, an ideological foundation that could bind together his diverse followers and give them a common cause. Islam provided that foundation. The Ghazis were drawn to his cause not only because of his military prowess, but because they believed in the righteousness of his mission. But Islam's role in Ottoman expansion went beyond the battlefield. It also played a key role in shaping the empire's political and social structure. As the Ottomans expanded, they brought with them a new order based on Islamic law, or Sharia. This legal framework provided stability and legitimacy to Osman's rule, allowing him to govern a growing and increasingly diverse population. It also helped to attract new followers, particularly from other Turkish tribes who shared the same religious beliefs. Sufism, a mystical branch of Islam, also played a critical role in the early Ottoman state. Sufi orders, which emphasized spiritual devotion and brotherhood, helped to unite the various Turkish tribes under Osman's leadership. These orders were not only spiritual centers, but also places of political influence. They provided Osman with a network of loyal followers who were bound not only by tribal ties, but by a shared sense of religious purpose. This combination of faith and loyalty made the early Ottoman state more cohesive and resilient in the face of external threats. Caroline Finkel, in her work Osman's Dream, highlights the unifying power of religion in the early Ottoman state, stating Osman's leadership, combined with the religious zeal of the Ghazi, allowed the Ottomans to galvanize disparate tribes into a unified force. This unity was crucial in allowing the Ottomans to push beyond their borders and challenge the Byzantine Empire, which was, at the time, weakened by internal strife and external pressures. The concept of jihad also played a significant role in legitimizing Ottoman expansion. For the Ghazi warriors and their leaders, conquest was not simply about acquiring wealth or territory. It was a religious duty. The lands they sought to conquer were seen as part of a larger struggle between the forces of Islam and the forces of disbelief. This belief gave the Ottomans a moral justification for their actions and made their conquests appear as part of a divine plan. It also provided them with a powerful source of motivation, as they believed that victory in battle would bring them not only worldly rewards, but also spiritual ones. In many ways, this ideology set the Ottomans apart from other rising powers of the time. While other empires sought to expand for economic or political reasons, the Ottomans were driven by a sense of religious mission. This gave their expansion a fervour and momentum that was difficult to resist. It also made them more appealing to potential allies, particularly among other Muslim rulers who shared their beliefs. As the Ottomans continued to grow, they would use this ideology to build alliances and consolidate their power, creating a network of loyal followers who were bound together by a shared sense of purpose. The ideological foundations of the Ottoman state were not static, however. As the empire grew, its leaders adapted their message to fit changing circumstances. While the early Ottomans were focused on jihad and the defense of Islam, later rulers would emphasize other aspects of Islamic law and governance. But throughout their history, the Ottomans never lost sight of the religious principles that had guided their rise. These principles remained a central part of the empire's identity and continued to shape its policies and actions for centuries to come. As we look back at the early years of the Ottoman Empire, it becomes clear that its success was not due to military strength alone. The Ottomans were able to harness the power of ideology, using religion to unite their followers and give them a sense of purpose. This combination of faith and force made the Ottoman state a formidable power, capable of expanding far beyond the borders of Anatolia. The foundation had been laid, but it would be under Osman's son, Orhan, that the Ottomans would truly begin to stretch their wings. His leadership would see the fledgling state evolve into a regional power, capable of challenging even the mightiest of its neighbours. When Orhan, the son of Osman, inherited the leadership of the fledgling Ottoman state in 1326, he stepped into a world shaped by his father's ambitions. But while Osman had laid the foundations, it was Orhan who would transform the Ottomans from a local power into a force to be reckoned with in Anatolia. Orhan's reign would be marked by key victories, critical reforms, and a vision that extended far beyond the small principality his father had nurtured. It was under Orhan's leadership that the Ottoman Empire began to truly take shape. The first and perhaps most significant of Orhan's early achievements was the capture of Bursa in 1326, the very year he took power. This victory was more than just a military conquest. It marked a turning point in Ottoman history. Bursa, a city of strategic importance and considerable wealth, would become the beating heart of the early Ottoman state. Lord Kinross, in the Ottoman Centuries, observes, with the fall of Bursa, the Ottomans secured their first stronghold, a base for future expansion. This stronghold would serve not only as the capital of the Ottoman Empire, but also as a centre for administration, trade, and culture. The capture of Bursa transformed the Ottomans from a nomadic, frontier force into a political entity with a stable, centralised base. Bursa's significance extended far beyond its walls. As the new capital, it became the administrative and military hub for Ottoman operations. From here, Orhan could oversee the expansion of the state's territory and influence. The city's wealth, derived from its thriving silk trade, helped fund the growing military campaigns that Orhan would soon launch. The establishment of a stable economic and political base in Bursa allowed the Ottomans to shift from a loosely organised tribal confederation into a more structured and centralised state. One of Orhan's most critical contributions to the early Ottoman state was his introduction of administrative and legal reforms. These reforms laid the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the most centralised empires of its time. Orhan recognised that to expand and sustain an empire, it was not enough to simply conquer land. He needed to govern it effectively. To that end, he established a taxation system that ensured a steady flow of revenue to support the state's ambitions. He also introduced the first Ottoman coinage, which not only helped to standardise the economy, but also symbolised the growing power and legitimacy of the Ottoman state. But governance and trade were only part of Orhan's vision. To secure his state and push for further expansion, he knew he needed to strengthen the Ottoman military. Under his leadership, the Ottoman army began to transform from a band of raiders into a professional standing army. Orhan's military reforms were both innovative and far-reaching, laying the foundation for the formidable Ottoman military machine that would dominate the region for centuries to come. One of the most significant developments during Orhan's reign was the creation of the Janissary Corps. Though the Janissaries would become more formalised in later years, their origins can be traced back to Orhan's time. These elite soldiers were drawn from Christian youths who had been captured or recruited from conquered territories and converted to Islam. Trained rigorously, the Janissaries became the backbone of the Ottoman military, renowned for their discipline and loyalty to the Sultan. This cause would go on to play a key role in nearly every major Ottoman military campaign for centuries, but its roots lay in the early military reforms spearheaded by Orhan. These military reforms allowed the Ottomans to shift their focus outward towards the weakened Byzantine Empire and rival Turkish beyliks. No longer confined to guerrilla warfare and opportunistic raids, the Ottomans now had the resources, organisation and discipline to launch sustained military campaigns. With a stronghold in Bursa and an increasingly powerful army at his command, cities and lands that lay on the fringes of his growing empire. The Byzantines, struggling to maintain control over their crumbling empire, were no match for the newly strengthened Ottomans. Orhan's military strategy was as much about diplomacy as it was about force. He was shrewd in his alliances, securing marriages and political agreements that allowed the Ottomans to expand their influence without always resorting to war. One of his most important alliances came through his marriage to the daughter of a Byzantine emperor, which allowed him to secure control of key Byzantine territories without a single battle. This blend of military might and diplomatic maneuvering would become a hallmark of Ottoman expansion in the years to come. As Orhan expanded Ottoman territory across northwestern Anatolia, he also continued to consolidate his power over the Turkish Beyliks. While some of these principalities resisted Ottoman dominance, others willingly submitted to Orhan's rule, recognizing the strength of his leadership and the benefits of aligning with the rising Ottoman state. By the time of his death in 1362, Orhan had more than doubled the size of the Ottoman realm, and his reforms had ensured that this expansion would not collapse under its own weight. He had taken a fledgling state and transformed it into a regional power. Orhan's reign set the stage for what was to come. The Ottomans were no longer a small, isolated principality on the fringes of Anatolia. They had become a major player in the region, with a professional army, a stable capital, and a centralized government capable of supporting further expansion. Orhan's legacy would live on in the policies, structures, and institutions he had created. But while his achievements in Anatolia were remarkable, the real test of Ottoman strength lay beyond the Bosporus, in the lands of Europe. With the foundation firmly in place, it was time for the Ottomans to look westward, towards the crumbling Byzantine Empire and the fractured Christian kingdoms of the Balkans. The next phase of Ottoman expansion would not only secure their position in Anatolia, but would bring them into direct conflict with the powers of Europe, setting the stage for a new chapter in the empire's story. The crossing of the Ottomans into Europe was a pivotal moment that would reshape the course of history. While Orhan had firmly established Ottoman power in Anatolia, it was the daring move across the Dardanelles Strait that would set the empire on a path to dominate much of southeastern Europe. This leap into the European continent was not a mere extension of territorial ambition. It was a strategic masterstroke, one that would lay the groundwork for centuries of Ottoman expansion and influence. In 1354, the Ottomans captured the fortress of Gallipoli, a seemingly small victory that would prove monumental in the years to come. Gallipoli was not just another fortress, it was a key stronghold on the European side of the Dardanelles Strait, a narrow but vital waterway that separated Asia from Europe. By taking Gallipoli, the Ottomans had done more than claim a piece of land. They had secured a foothold on the European continent, a base from which they could launch further conquests. Caroline Finkel, in her work Osman's Dream, captures the significance of this moment, writing, "Gallipoli was not just a fortress, it was a gateway to Europe, a launching pad for greater conquests. capture of Gallipoli was a strategic triumph for the Ottomans. Controlling the Dardanelles meant that the Ottomans could move their armies and supplies between Asia and Europe with relative ease, ensuring that their campaigns on both sides of the strait were well supported. This ability to project power across two continents gave the Ottomans a distinct advantage over their European rivals, many of whom were already weakened by internal conflicts and external threats. With Gallipoli firmly in their grasp, the Ottomans had opened the door to the Balkans, a region that would soon become the focus of their expansionist ambitions. But military conquest alone was not the key to Ottoman success in Europe. Orhan, like his father, understood the value of diplomacy as a tool for consolidating and expanding power. One of the most significant diplomatic moves of his reign was his marriage to Theodora, the daughter of the Byzantine Emperor John VI Cantacuzenos. This marriage was more than a union between two individuals. It was a symbolic and strategic alliance that intertwined the fates of the Ottoman and Byzantine empires. Historian Jason Goodwin, in Lords of the Horizons, remarks, Orhan's marriage to Theodora signified a diplomatic coup, intertwining Ottoman ambitions with the Byzantine world. This alliance with Byzantium allowed the Ottomans to position themselves not as outsiders, but as players in the complex political landscape of southeastern Europe. The marriage gave Orhan a degree of legitimacy in the eyes of the Christian powers, softening the initial shock of Ottoman expansion into Europe. It also provided a measure of stability on the Ottomans' western front, allowing Orhan to focus his military efforts on other targets while maintaining a peaceful relationship with the Byzantines. Through this marriage, Orhan was able to secure the Byzantines as allies, at least temporarily, while the Ottomans continued to expand their influence in the region. The marriage to Theodora also highlights the Ottomans' ability to blend cultures and forge alliances that transcended religious and ethnic boundaries. While the Ottomans were committed to their Islamic identity, they were pragmatic in their approach to governance and diplomacy. They understood that alliances with Christian rulers could be just as valuable as military victories in securing their empire's future. This flexibility in diplomacy allowed the Ottomans to navigate the complex web of European politics with skill and finesse, making them a formidable force both on and off the battlefield. Under Orhan's leadership, diplomacy was not limited to marriage alliances. The Ottomans also engaged in treaties and agreements with other European powers, ensuring that they could expand their territory without constantly being at war. These diplomatic efforts helped to create a buffer of stability around the Ottoman state, allowing them to focus on their expansionist goals without the threat of immediate retaliation from their neighbours. It was a delicate balancing act, but one that Orhan and his successors would master as they continued to grow their empire. By the time Orhan's reign came to a close, the Ottomans had firmly established themselves as a major power in both Anatolia and Europe. The capture of Gallipoli had opened the door to the Balkans, and Orhan's diplomatic efforts had secured alliances that would help pave the way for future conquests. The Ottomans had proven that they were not just raiders on the frontier, just the beginning. The real test of Ottoman strength would come as they set their sights on the Balkans, a region fraught with political fragmentation and military opportunities. Orhan's foundation of diplomacy and military reform would serve as the bedrock for his successor, Murad, as the Ottomans prepared to expand deeper into Europe. With the Balkans in turmoil, the stage was set for the Ottomans to make their next bold move. As the sun set on Orhan's reign, a new dawn of ambition rose with his son, Murad at the helm of the Ottoman Empire. Murad's vision for the empire was clear: to extend Ottoman rule further into the fractured and war-torn lands of the Balkans. The Balkans, a region ripe with political instability and fragmented by rival kingdoms, presented both an opportunity and a challenge. For Murad, it was the perfect landscape on which to build the next chapter of Ottoman dominance. Murad first wasted no time in launching military campaigns that would secure the Ottoman foothold in Europe. His ambition was not merely to raid or plunder, as many had before him. Murad had grander plans: to bring the Balkan territories under lasting Ottoman control. His most notable victory in this campaign came in 1369 with the strategic capture of Adrianople, known today as Edirne. Situated at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, Adrianople was not just another city to conquer. It was a prize of immense strategic value. By capturing it, Murad had not only secured a gateway into the heart of the Balkans, but had also established a new capital for his empire in Europe. This move was a masterstroke of both strategy and symbolism. Colin Imber, in the Ottoman Empire, 1300 to 1650, observed, "The conquest of Edirne was a symbol of the Ottomans' growing power in Europe. The city's location at the intersection of key trade routes and its proximity to the Byzantine Empire's remaining strongholds made it the perfect base for future Ottoman conquests. It also allowed Murad to exert control over both European and Anatolian territories, further solidifying the Ottomans' growing influence on both sides of the Bosporus. The transformation of Edirne into the Ottoman capital not only cemented their presence in Europe, but also signalled to the world that the Ottomans were no longer a peripheral power. They were here to stay. Under Murad's rule, Edirne became a thriving centre of Ottoman administration and military power. The city served as a hub for planning and launching military campaigns into the Balkans, and it was from here that Murad directed his armies into the fragmented kingdoms of Serbia, Bulgaria, and beyond. The Ottomans were no longer simply invaders from the east. They had become a European power in their own right. The capture of Edirne was not just a territorial gain. It was a declaration that the Ottomans had arrived on the European stage. Murad's success in the Balkans was not solely due to military might. He was also a master diplomat, understanding that lasting power required more than just conquering lands. It required controlling the people who lived there. Throughout his campaigns, Murad skillfully negotiated with local rulers, offering them terms of vassalage rather than total destruction. Many of these rulers, weakened by internal strife and external threats, accepted Murad's offers. In exchange for their submission, they were allowed to retain a degree of autonomy, paying tribute to the Ottoman Sultan and pledging military support when needed. This diplomatic approach allowed Murad to consolidate Ottoman power in the Balkans without the need for constant warfare. By bringing local rulers into the Ottoman fold, Murad created a network of alliances that strengthened his position and allowed him to expand further without spreading his forces too thin. His combination of diplomacy and military pressure created a delicate balance that ensured the stability of newly conquered territories while keeping potential rivals in check. One of the key regions where this balance played out was in the Serbian territories. Serbia, once a powerful kingdom in the Balkans, had been weakened by internal divisions and external threats. Murad saw an opportunity and launched a series of campaigns aimed at bringing the Serbian lords under Ottoman control. Some Serbian rulers resisted, leading to bloody battles, while others, recognizing the inevitability of Ottoman dominance, chose to submit peacefully. Through a combination of force and diplomacy, Murad managed to extend Ottoman influence deep into Serbian lands. By the late 1380s, the Ottoman Empire had established itself as the dominant power in the Balkans. Murad's conquests had expanded the empire's borders significantly, and his diplomatic efforts had created a network of vassal states that pledged allegiance to the Ottoman Sultan. But even as the Ottomans solidified their control over the region, tensions continued to simmer beneath the surface. Many Balkan rulers chafed under Ottoman rule, and the fragile peace Murad had brokered was threatened by the growing discontent among his vassals. It was this discontent, combined with the ambitions of rival Balkan leaders, that would soon come to a head in one of the most defining battles in Ottoman history, the Battle of Kosovo. The Battle of Kosovo in 1389 was more than a mere clash of armies. It was the culmination of growing tensions between the rising Ottoman Empire and the fractured Serbian principalities. By this time, the Ottomans, under Murad I, had steadily encroached upon the Balkans, asserting their dominance with both military strength and strategic diplomacy. However, the Serbian lords, led by Prince Lazar Rebljanović, were not willing to let their homeland fall without a fight. Kosovo would become the stage for one of the most significant and tragic confrontations in Balkan history, a battle that would forever shape the legacy of both the Ottoman Empire and the Serbian people. In the years leading up to the battle, the Serbian principalities were caught between internal divisions and the external pressure of Ottoman expansion. Murad's victories in the Balkans had sent shockwaves through the region as kingdom after kingdom fell under the Ottoman banner. For the Serbian rulers, the writing was on the wall. Ottoman domination seemed inevitable. Prince Lazar, one of the last powerful Serbian leaders, knew that the time had come for a final stand. He rallied his forces, calling on his allies and vassals to face the Ottoman threat head-on. On the other side, Murad I, now an experienced and battle-hardened sultan, gathered his army for what he likely knew would be one of his greatest tests. The The Ottomans had grown accustomed to victory, but this battle would not be easy. The Serbian forces, though smaller in number, were fiercely motivated, fighting not just for territory, but for the survival of their way of life. The stakes were as high as they had ever been. The morning of June 28th, 1389, dawned on the plains of Kosovo. Both armies knew that this day would be decisive. The Serbian forces, led by Prince Lazar, positioned themselves to hold off the Ottoman advance. Their troops were fewer in number, but well prepared, with heavy cavalry forming the backbone of their defence. On the opposite side of the field, the Ottoman army was a diverse and powerful force, its ranks filled with disciplined soldiers, including elite cavalry and foot soldiers hardened by years of conquest. As the battle commenced, the Ottomans launched their cavalry in a series of devastating charges, hoping to break the Serbian lines with overwhelming force. The Serbs, however, resisted fiercely, using the terrain to their advantage and meeting the Ottoman assaults with determined counterattacks. For hours, the two armies clashed in a brutal struggle, each side gaining and losing ground in turn. The plains of Kosovo became a battleground, stained with the blood of both empires. Amid the chaos, a pivotal moment occurred that would change the course of the battle and the future of the Ottoman Empire. Murad I, the Sultan who had led the Ottomans to victory time and again, was struck down on the battlefield. The exact details of his death remain shrouded in mystery. Some accounts suggest that he was assassinated by a Serbian knight who had infiltrated the Ottoman camp, while others speak of a more traditional death in the heat of battle. What is certain, however, is the profound impact Murad's death had on the morale of both armies. For the Ottomans, the loss of their leader could have spelled disaster. Yet, in a remarkable display of resilience, Murad's son, Bayezid, took command and rallied the troops. Bayezid's swift leadership ensured that the Ottoman forces did not falter, and they continued to press their advantage. For the Serbs, the death of Murad may have been a symbolic victory, but it was not enough to turn the tide. Despite their valiant resistance, the Serbian forces were gradually overwhelmed by the sheer strength of the Ottoman army. By the end of the day, the field of Kosovo was littered with the bodies of fallen warriors from both sides. The Serbian army had been decimated, their noble cause shattered. Prince Lazar himself was captured and executed, marking the end of Serbian resistance. The Battle of Kosovo had become a graveyard for Serbia's independence, a poignant symbol of both loss and resilience. As Noel Malcolm notes in Kosovo, A Short History, the field of Kosovo became a graveyard for the Serbs, a symbol of both loss and resilience. This single battle would be immortalised in Serbian folklore and memory, representing a moment of tragic heroism that would echo through the centuries. For the Ottomans, the Battle of Kosovo was both a victory and a moment of profound change. While they had secured their dominance in the Balkans, they had lost a sultan in the process. Murad's death elevated him to the status of a martyr in Ottoman history, and his son, Bayezid, who had come to be known as Bayezid the Thunderbolt, ascended to the throne amidst the blood-soaked plains of Kosovo. The battle marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, a transition from Murad's careful expansion to Bayezid's more aggressive and rapid conquests. The legacy of the Battle of Kosovo lived on in both Ottoman and Balkan memory. For the Ottomans, it was a testament to their unrelenting power, a battle that solidified their control over the Balkans and demonstrated their ability to overcome even the gravest challenges. For the Serbs, however, it became a defining moment of national identity, a symbol of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. The battle would remain etched in the collective consciousness of the region, shaping the narratives of resistance and domination that persisted for centuries. As the dust settled on the battlefield, the Ottoman Empire was poised to continue its march across Europe, strengthened by its military prowess and the formidable Janissary Corps, a unique military institution that had begun to take shape during Murad's reign. These elite soldiers would soon become the backbone of the Ottoman war machine, carrying the empire to new heights of conquest and glory. The establishment of the Janissary Corps under Murad I was a turning point in the history of the Ottoman Empire. This new force was not merely a military unit, it was the backbone of the Ottoman war machine, an elite corps of soldiers that would come to define the empire's strength for centuries. Murad's creation of the Janissaries was revolutionary, a bold experiment in building a professional military force from an unlikely source. Christian boys taken from the Balkans through a system known as the Devshirme. These boys were converted to Islam, trained rigorously, and moulded into the most disciplined and feared soldiers of their time. The Janissaries would not only serve as the Sultan's elite guard, but as the very foundation of Ottoman dominance. The Devshirme system, introduced during Murad's reign, was as controversial as it was effective. Christian boys, often from the rural regions of the Balkans, were taken from their families and brought to the Ottoman heartland. This was not an act of sheer brutality, however. The boys were selected for their potential, and once taken into the system, they were provided with education, training, and opportunities that would elevate them to positions of great power within the empire. While they lost their Christian faith, they gained the promise of a future in the Ottoman military or administration, rising through the ranks to become some of the most influential figures in the empire. What set the Janissaries apart from other military forces of the time was not just their rigorous training, but their complete loyalty to the Sultan. These men were not tied to any noble families or local power structures. They were wholly dedicated to the Ottoman ruler. Their loyalty was unwavering and their discipline unmatched. Jason Goodwin, in Lords of the Horizons, captures the significance of this force, stating, "The Janissaries were more than soldiers. They were the foundation of Ottoman dominance. It was this foundation that allowed the Ottomans to expand their territory at a pace that left their rivals scrambling to keep up. The Janissaries were trained not only in the art of war, but also in strategy, tactics, and governance. Many went on to become administrators, governors, or high-ranking officials within the empire. Their dual role as both soldiers and statesmen made them a powerful force within the Ottoman system, ensuring that they played a crucial part in both military conquests and the consolidation of power in newly acquired territories. The precision that truly set them apart. Unlike the feudal armies of Europe, which were often made up of hastily assembled knights and peasants, the Janissaries were a standing army, always ready for battle. Their training was continuous, and their cohesion as a fighting force was unparalleled. It was this professionalism that allowed them to play a decisive role in many of Murad I's key victories in both the Balkans and Anatolia. One of the key battles that showcased the effectiveness of the Janissaries was the Battle of Kosovo in 1389. While the Ottomans ultimately triumphed, it was the disciplined tactics of the Janissaries that helped turn the tide in their favour, even after the death of Murad on the battlefield. Their ability to maintain their composure and execute orders under pressure was a testament to the rigorous training they had undergone. This level of professionalism gave the Ottomans a critical edge in their campaigns, ensuring that they could hold their ground even in the face of adversity. The political significance of the Janissaries also cannot be overstated. As they grew in power, they became more than just soldiers. They became a political force within the Ottoman Empire. The sultans relied heavily on their loyalty, and in return, the Janissaries gained privileges and influence that extended far beyond the battlefield. Their role as the Sultan's personal guard gave them direct access to the heart of Ottoman power, and over time they became a key player in the empire's political landscape. In the long term, the establishment of the Janissary Corps had a profound impact on the stability and expansion of the Ottoman Empire. Their presence allowed the Ottomans to maintain control over a vast and diverse territory, ensuring that rebellions could be swiftly crushed and new territories could be effectively governed. The Janissaries were not only the military muscle behind Ottoman expansion, they were the glue that held the empire together, providing both security and administrative expertise in equal measure. Murad I's creation of the Janissary Corps was nothing short of a military revolution. It allowed the Ottomans to field a professional, loyal, and highly skilled army that could compete with, and often outmatch, the feudal armies of Europe. The Devshirme system, while controversial, created a pipeline of talent that fueled the empire's expansion and ensured its stability. By the time of Murad's death, the Janissaries had already established themselves as an indispensable part of the Ottoman military machine. As Bayezid I ascended the throne after Murad's death, he inherited not only the empire, but also the elite force that would help propel his ambitious plans. With the Janissary Corps firmly in place, Bayezid was poised to push the empire to new heights, implementing his own reforms and leading campaigns that would further shape the destiny of the Ottoman Empire. Bayezid thus, famously known as Yildirim or the Thunderbolt, burst onto the scene in 1389, inheriting an empire on the rise after the death of his father, Murad I. His nickname was no accident. Bayezid's reign would be defined by his lightning-fast campaigns and relentless ambition. The new Sultan was not content to rest on the laurels of his predecessors. He envisioned an empire that stretched even further, crossing mountains and rivers to extend the Ottoman reach into both Europe and Anatolia. His reign, though solidify Ottoman control in the Balkans, a region still reeling from the aftershocks of the Battle of Kosovo. He moved swiftly, launching campaigns into Thessaloniki, Wallachia, and even as far as Hungary, where he challenged the might of the European kingdoms. Bayezid's military prowess was clear from the outset. His ability to mobilize his forces quickly and strike with precision earned him the moniker the Thunderbolt. Joseph Freely, in The Rise and Fall of the Ottoman Empire, aptly notes, Bayezid was a ruler in a hurry, earning his nickname Yildirim, or Thunderbolt, for his speed in conquest. Thessaloniki, an important port city and a vital link between the Aegean and the Balkans, fell to Bayezid's forces, marking a major victory in his quest to control the region. From there, his armies pushed into Wallachia, clashing with the forces of Messiah the Elder in a series of fierce battles. Though these campaigns were hard fought, Bayezid's military tactics and the discipline of his Janissary Corps allowed him to gain the upper hand, further cementing Ottoman influence in the Balkans. However, Bayezid's ambitions extended beyond Europe. He also turned his gaze back toward Anatolia, a region that was still divided among various Turkish beyliks, principalities. Bayezid knew that to truly secure his empire, he needed to bring these rival factions under Ottoman control. He embarked on a campaign of consolidation, defeating or absorbing the remaining Turkish beyliks into his realm. His subjugation of these beyliks not only fortified Ottoman rule in Anatolia, but also ensured that no local power could challenge his authority. With Anatolia firmly under his control, Bayezid could now focus on the next phase of his expansion. While military conquest was a hallmark of Bayezid's reign, his contributions went beyond the battlefield. Recognizing the need for a more efficient and centralized state, Bayezid introduced a series of reforms aimed at strengthening the administrative and military structures of the Ottoman Empire. These reforms helped streamline governance, allowing for better control over newly conquered territories and more effective tax collection, which in turn funded his military campaigns. Bayezid's reforms also extended to the army, where he made improvements to the existing systems of recruitment and logistics, ensuring that the Ottoman military could maintain its relentless pace of expansion. One of Bayezid's most significant administrative moves was the strengthening of the devshirme system, the practice by which Christian boys from the Balkans were recruited, converted to Islam, and trained as soldiers and administrators. This system not only provided a steady stream of highly skilled soldiers for the Janissary Corps, but also helped create a loyal administrative class that was completely devoted to the Sultan. By expanding and refining the devshirme system, Bayezid ensured that his empire would have the manpower and leadership necessary to sustain its rapid growth. Despite his aggressive expansionist policies, Bayezid understood the importance of diplomacy and maintaining alliances where possible. He continued to negotiate with local rulers in both Europe and Anatolia, offering them terms of vassalage in exchange for their submission. This strategy allowed him to secure the loyalty of key territories without having to constantly resort to military force. By balancing conquest with diplomacy, Bayezid was able to consolidate his power while minimizing the internal threats to his rule. However, Bayezid's rapid expansion did not go unnoticed by his rivals. In the Balkans, his conquests drew the attention of Hungary and other European powers, who began to view the Ottoman advance with increasing alarm. This tension would ultimately set the stage for a major confrontation between the Ottoman Empire and the Christian forces of Europe, as Bayezid's ambitions continued to push the boundaries of his empire. But it was in Anatolia, closer to home, where Bayezid's expansionist drive faced its most significant challenge. His consolidation of power in the region was seen as a direct threat by many local rulers, including the Byzantine Empire, which still controlled the great city of Constantinople. For centuries, Constantinople had been the jewel of the Eastern Roman Empire, a city of immense wealth, strategic importance, and religious significance. While previous Ottoman rulers had laid siege to the city, none had been able to take it. Bayezid, however, was determined to change that. Having secured his power in both Europe and Anatolia, Bayezid now set his sights on Constantinople. The city was a symbol of Byzantine resistance, and its capture would mark the ultimate triumph of the Ottoman Empire. The siege of Constantinople, which began in 1394, would test the limits of Bayezid's military and political power. The world watched as the thunderbolt prepared to strike at the heart of Byzantium, a siege that would last for years and shake the foundations of the medieval world. The walls of Constantinople had withstood countless sieges, but by 1394 the city found itself facing a new and relentless force. Bayezid, the thunderbolt. His ambition knew no bounds, and the jewel of the Byzantine Empire was the ultimate prize. For centuries, Constantinople had been a beacon of power and prestige, its formidable walls protecting it from invaders and marking it as the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire. But Bayezid saw more than just a city. He saw the key to dominating both the Christian Balkans and the Muslim world, a city whose capture would cement his legacy and the future of the Ottoman Empire. The siege began with a calculated strategy, one designed not just to assault Constantinople directly, but to starve it into submission. Bayezid initiated a blockade in 1394, cutting off the city's vital supply lines and isolating it from the outside world. His aim was to slowly choke the life out of the Byzantine capital, forcing its leaders to capitulate without the need for a full-scale assault. Bayezid's forces surrounded the city, tightening their grip as the months turned into years. For nearly 8 years, the Ottomans besieged the great city, waiting for its inevitable collapse. However, Constantinople was no ordinary fortress. Its walls, some of the most formidable in the medieval world, had been strengthened by centuries of innovation. Emperor Manuel II, a seasoned and determined ruler, was not about to let the city fall easily. Under his direction, the Byzantines made significant improvements to their defences. The already impenetrable Theodosian walls were fortified further, and the Byzantine navy, though weakened, worked tirelessly to keep supply routes open across the Bosporus. Manuel II's defensive strategies were crucial to to the city's survival during this long and grueling siege. Historian John Julius Norwich observed, "The walls of Constantinople withstood as they had for centuries, but the Ottomans were knocking louder than ever before." Bayezid understood the strategic importance of the Bosporus Strait, the narrow waterway that separated Europe from Asia and controlled access between the Aegean and Black Seas. By dominating the Bosporus, Bayezid could strangle Constantinople's lifelines and extend his influence across both continents. To this end, he ordered the construction of 2 fortresses along the strait, one on the European side and one on the Asian side. These fortresses allowed the Ottomans to control the flow of goods and military reinforcements into the city, tightening the noose around Constantinople even further. The siege of Constantinople was not just a military endeavour. It was a statement of Bayezid's broader ambitions. By taking the Byzantine capital, he could cement Ottoman dominance over the Balkans and present himself as the unifier of the Muslim world, a leader who had brought down one of Christendom's most enduring strongholds. The city held both symbolic and strategic value. Its capture would be a monumental victory for the Ottomans, not only in terms of territorial expansion, but in solidifying their dominance over Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. Bayezid's vision of empire rested on bringing Constantinople into the Ottoman fold, making it the keystone in his grand design. Yet, as the years dragged on, it became clear that the walls of Constantinople were not easily breached. The city's resilience, coupled with the occasional arrival of supplies from European allies, kept it from falling into Bayezid's grasp. Despite his efforts to block every route and his control over the surrounding region, the Byzantine capital held on. What had initially seemed like a swift campaign had turned into a drawn-out struggle, with neither side willing to back down. The siege also took its toll on Bayezid's resources and his broader military campaigns. As more and more of his attention was diverted to Constantinople, other threats began to emerge on the empire's borders. While Bayezid remained focused on his prize, he was becoming increasingly vulnerable to dangers from the east. One such danger was the looming threat of Timur, the Central Asian conqueror, whose empire stretched across Persia and beyond. Though Bayezid had been focused on expanding his empire into Europe and fortifying his control over Anatolia, the rising power of Timur would soon demand his full attention. By the early 1400s, the siege of Constantinople remained unresolved. The city still stood defiant, and the Ottomans, though relentless, had not yet found a way to breach its defences. Bayezid's grand ambition to take the Byzantine capital was slowly slipping from his grasp, and the empire he had built was now facing a new and terrifying challenge. Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane, had already carved out a vast empire of his own and had begun to cast his gaze towards the Ottomans. Conflict between these two titanic rulers was inevitable. Bayezid's focus would soon have to shift from the walls of Constantinople to the steppes of Anatolia, where Timur's armies were advancing with terrifying speed. The siege, which had once seemed like the key to Bayezid's legacy, As the tension between these two empires mounted, the fate of the Ottoman state would be decided not in the shadow of Constantinople's walls, but on the plains of Ankara, where Bayezid's destiny awaited. The rivalry between Bayezid I, the Thunderbolt, and Timur, the fearsome Central Asian conqueror, was inevitable. Both men sought to carve out empires that would dominate the Islamic world, and neither was willing to yield to the other. Bayezid had expanded the Ottoman Empire with lightning speed, subduing the Balkans and Anatolia, while laying siege to the great city of Constantinople. But Timur, with an empire that stretched from the steppes of Central Asia to Persia, saw Bayezid's rise as a challenge to his supremacy. What began as a clash of egos would culminate in one of the most catastrophic defeats in Ottoman history, the Battle of Ankara in 1402. Timur, a brilliant strategist and ruthless leader, had been watching Bayezid's rapid expansion with growing concern. The two men exchanged letters, both filled with boasts and veiled threats, but diplomacy was never truly on the table. Timur, who had crushed empires in his path, saw in Bayezid a rival too dangerous to ignore. As tensions grew, Timur gathered his vast and battle-hardened army, preparing to face the Ottomans in a showdown that would determine the fate of two empires. In July of 1402, the two forces met on the plains near Ankara. Bayezid, confident in his military prowess and the strength of his janissaries, believed he could withstand Timur's assault. His forces were vast, and his reputation as the Thunderbolt preceded him. But what Bayezid did not anticipate was the sheer size and ferocity of Timur's army, nor the betrayal that awaited him on the battlefield. Timur's army, made up of elite cavalry and seasoned warriors, included several contingents of Turkish troops who had previously sworn allegiance to Bayezid. As the battle raged, many of these troops defected, turning against the Ottomans and siding with Timur. This act of treachery sealed Bayezid's fate. The Battle of Ankara was a disaster from the start. Bayezid's forces, outmaneuvered and overwhelmed, struggled to maintain their formation as Timur's cavalry cut through their ranks. Despite the fierce resistance of the janissaries, the Ottomans were no match for Timur's strategic brilliance. By the end of the day, Bayezid's army was shattered, his forces in disarray. As Roger Crowley writes in 1453, the Holy War for Constantinople. Ankara was a catastrophic blow. The empire itself teetered on the brink of collapse. The defeat was total, and the aftermath would send shockwaves through the Ottoman world. Perhaps the greatest humiliation came not in battle, but in the moments that followed. Bayezid, once feared and respected across Europe and Asia, was captured by Timur's forces. The once mighty Sultan, who had built an empire with his lightning-fast campaigns, now found himself in chains. His capture marked a low point in Ottoman history. Timur, known for his cruelty, paraded Bayezid as a prisoner, using him as a pawn in his displays of dominance. Some accounts suggest that Timur humiliated Bayezid by keeping him in an iron cage, a symbol of the complete and utter defeat the Ottomans had suffered. Bayezid would spend the remainder of his life in captivity, far from the lands he the strain of imprisonment, and in 1403, just 1 year after the battle, Bayezid died. The exact circumstances of his death remain unclear. Some say he succumbed to illness, while others claim he took his own life. Regardless of how it happened, Bayezid's death in captivity was a tragic end for a ruler who had once seemed unstoppable. But the consequences of the Battle of Ankara extended far beyond Bayezid's personal humiliation. His defeat plunged the Ottoman Empire into chaos. With the Sultan captured and the army in ruins, the empire teetered on the edge of collapse. Bayezid's sons, each vying for the throne, soon turned against one another in a bloody civil war known as the Ottoman Interregnum. For nearly a decade, the once mighty empire was torn apart from within, as rival factions battled for control. The Ottoman Empire, which had seemed invincible under Bayezid's rule, now faced an existential crisis. Timur, satisfied with his victory, did not stay to consolidate his gains. Instead, he turned his attention elsewhere, leaving the Ottomans to their internal strife. But the damage had been done. The empire's survival was far from certain, and its future would depend on which of Bayezid's sons could emerge victorious from the brutal civil war that followed. The Battle of Ankara was a turning point for the Ottoman Empire, a moment of profound defeat that left the state in disarray. Yet, from this chaos, a new leader would eventually rise, determined to reunify the empire and restore its former glory. The Interregnum, a period of civil war and uncertainty, would test the resilience of the Ottoman state like never before. The Battle of Ankara in 1402 had shattered the Ottoman Empire, leaving it leaderless and vulnerable to internal and external threats. Bayezid then, the once mighty Sultan who had driven the empire's expansion with such ferocity, now languished in captivity, a prisoner of Timur's forces. With Bayezid's capture and subsequent death in 1403, the question of succession loomed large. Who would claim the throne and restore order to an empire in chaos? The answer was not simple. What followed was a brutal and bloody period of civil war, known as the Ottoman Interregnum, a time when the very survival of the Ottoman state was at stake. Bayezid's death left his sons in fierce competition for the throne. With no clear successor, the empire plunged into a violent power struggle that pitted brother against brother. The rivals were many: Suleiman, Isa, Musa, and Mehmed. Each believed they had a rightful claim to the Sultanate, and each was determined to seize it by force if necessary. What ensued was a decade-long conflict that tore the empire apart, as the sons of Bayezid sought to outmaneuver one another in a ruthless game of power and survival. Suleiman, the eldest, initially emerged as the most powerful contender. He controlled the Western territories, including much of the Balkans, and quickly declared himself Sultan. However, his claim was far from secure. In Anatolia, his brother Isa also declared himself Sultan, setting the stage for a protracted struggle between the two. As battles raged across the empire, it became clear that no one was safe. Alliances shifted rapidly, with local rulers, military commanders, and even foreign powers taking sides in the conflict. But it was Mehmed, one of Bayezid's younger sons, who would eventually rise above the chaos. Mehmed, though initially at a disadvantage, proved to be the most resourceful of his brothers. He controlled a small but strategically important region in northern Anatolia, and from there he began to build a power base. Over the course of the civil war, Mehmed demonstrated a keen ability to win the loyalty of both his soldiers and key political figures. He was patient, waiting for his moment to strike as his brothers exhausted themselves in their battles for supremacy. One of the most pivotal moments in the interregnum came when Mehmed allied himself with his brother Musa, who had rebelled against Suleiman in the Balkans. Together, they managed to overthrow Suleiman, ending his claim to the throne. However, this alliance was short-lived. Once Suleiman was defeated, Musa turned on Mehmed, declaring himself Sultan of the Empire. This betrayal plunged the Ottoman state back into chaos, as the two brothers became locked in a bitter struggle for control. The rivalry between Mehmed and Musa culminated in a series of decisive battles. While Musa had the advantage of controlling the Balkans, Mehmed's careful diplomacy and military strategy began to turn the tide in his favour. In 1413, Mehmed finally defeated Musa, putting an end to the civil war. After a decade of bloodshed and uncertainty, Mehmed emerged as the sole ruler of the Ottoman Empire, becoming Mehmed I, the Sultan, who would reunite the fractured state. Mehmed's victory was hard won, but it did not mean the empire's troubles were over. The civil war had left the Ottoman state weakened, its territories fragmented, and its enemies emboldened. The empire's very existence had been hanging by a thread, and while Mehmed had secured the throne, his task now was to rebuild what had been lost. The challenge ahead of him was immense. He had to restore both the strength of the Ottoman military and the unity of the empire's diverse populations, who had been torn apart by years of conflict. Rebuilding the empire required more than just military might. It demanded a careful balancing act of diplomacy, governance, and reform. Mehmed understood that to restore the empire's former glory, he needed to win the trust of both his subjects and his allies. His first priority was to consolidate his power and eliminate any remaining threats to his rule. He quickly moved to secure his borders, negotiating treaties with rival states and quelling rebellions within his territories. Mehmed also set about restoring the empire's infrastructure, which had been damaged during the years of civil war. Roads, bridges, and fortresses were rebuilt, and trade routes re-established, helping to revitalise the Ottoman economy. Mehmed recognised that a strong economy was essential to the empire's recovery, and he worked tirelessly to restore confidence among merchants and traders, both within the empire and beyond. His efforts were successful, and soon the Ottoman economy began to recover, bringing prosperity back to the region. However, Mehmed's most significant contributions were in the realm of governance. He implemented a series of administrative reforms aimed at strengthening the central authority of the Sultanate. By streamlining the empire's bureaucracy and centralising power in his hands, Mehmed ensured that the Ottoman state could function more efficiently. His reforms also helped to reduce the influence of local power brokers who had become too powerful during the civil war. reassert control over the empire's far-flung provinces. Perhaps most importantly, Mehmed worked to heal the divisions that had been created during the civil war. He understood that the Ottoman Empire's strength lay in its diversity, and he made a concerted effort to bring together the different ethnic and religious groups that had been pitted against each other during the conflict. By fostering a sense of unity and cooperation, Mehmed was able to stabilise the empire and lay the groundwork for future expansion. Mehmed I's reign marked a turning point in Ottoman history. Under his leadership, the empire began to recover from the devastation of the interregnum. His efforts to rebuild and restore the state were nothing short of remarkable, and by the time of his death in 1421, the Ottoman Empire was once again a formidable force in both the Balkans and Anatolia. As historian Douglas Howard observed, like a phoenix, the Ottomans rose from the ashes, though their recovery was far from guaranteed. Mehmed's legacy would live on in the empire's resurgence, but his work was far from complete. The Ottoman state, though stronger than it had been at the end of the Civil War, still faced significant challenges. Threats from both internal and external forces remained, and the empire's expansion into Europe and the Muslim world was far from over. The foundation that Mehmed laid would be built upon by future sultans, but it was his vision of a unified and powerful state that made that future possible. As the next generation of Ottoman rulers took the throne, the empire's ambitions would grow even bolder. One of the most influential figures in this new chapter was Mehmed II, a ruler whose early life and ascension would set the stage for one of the most dramatic moments in Ottoman history, the fall of Constantinople. Mehmed II was born into a world of ambition and conflict, a world that would shape him into one of the most visionary rulers the Ottoman Empire would ever know. Born in 1432, Mehmed was the son of Sultan Mehmed II, a ruler who had fought to secure the empire's place in both Europe and Asia. From a young age, Mehmed's future was set on a trajectory far greater than that of an ordinary prince. His early education was rigorous and designed to mould him into both a warrior and a scholar. Under the guidance of prominent scholars of the time, Mehmed was exposed to the intellectual riches of Islamic, Byzantine, and Western traditions. He studied philosophy, history, science, and military strategy, gaining a deep understanding of the world around him and, crucially, of the forces that had shaped empires before his own. But Mehmed's education was not merely academic. His father ensured that he was trained in the art of war from an early age, honing his military instincts and teaching him the tactical skills that would serve him well on the battlefield. This blend of intellectual rigour and military training made Mehmed a formidable figure even in his youth. He was driven by a singular ambition that would define his reign: the conquest of Constantinople. The city loomed large in his imagination, a prize of immense strategic and symbolic value. As Lord Kinross aptly noted in the Ottoman centuries, Mehmed was a student of conquest, his eyes ever set on the city of cities, Constantinople. Constantinople was no ordinary city. For centuries, it had stood as the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the last vestige of the once great Roman Empire. Its massive walls had withstood countless sieges, and it was seen as the ultimate prize by many conquerors who came before. Yet, Mehmed knew that the city's capture would be more than just a victory. It would be the culmination of the Ottoman Empire's rise to power, and a moment that would forever change the balance of power between East and West. Even as a boy, Mehmed was captivated by the idea of bringing the Byzantine capital under Ottoman control. Mehmed's ambitions were tested when, at the age of just 12, he briefly ascended to the throne in 1444 after his father, Sultan Mehmed II, chose to abdicate. It was a tumultuous time for the empire, as external enemies sought to take advantage of the young sultan's inexperience. Mehmed's early reign was cut short when Murad was recalled to the throne to deal with pressing military threats. Yet this early taste of power left a lasting impression on Mehmed. He saw firsthand the pressures of ruling, the constant threat of rebellion, and the importance of strong leadership. It was a lesson he would not forget when he later returned to the throne. In 1451, after the death of his father, Mehmed ascended once more to the Sultanate, this time prepared for the challenges ahead. Now in his late teens, Mehmed was no longer the uncertain boy who had briefly worn the crown. He was a man with a vision, a ruler determined to secure his place in history. His focus was immediate and clear. Constantinople. Mehmed wasted no time in preparing for the conquest that had long occupied his thoughts. He began by strengthening the Ottoman Empire from within, securing alliances and ensuring that his military was well equipped for the task ahead. One of his first moves was to secure the Bosporus Strait, a key waterway that controlled access to the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Mehmed constructed the fortress of Rumeli Hisari on the European side of the Bosporus, directly across from an existing Ottoman fortress on the Asian side. This allowed him to control naval traffic in and out of Constantinople, tightening his grip on the city before the siege even began. His strategic mind was already at work, meticulously planning every step of the campaign. Mehmed also understood that taking Constantinople would require more than brute force. It would require advanced technology. To this end, he sought out engineers and craftsmen from across the empire and beyond. One of his most significant innovations was the development of massive cannons, capable of firing enormous stone balls that could breach the city's legendary walls. These cannons would play a crucial role in the coming siege, as Mehmed's forces prepared to face one of the most formidable defences in the world. But Mehmed's preparations went beyond military might. He was also a master of diplomacy, carefully navigating the complex political landscape of the time. He secured peace treaties with his European neighbours, ensuring that they would not interfere with his plans. Meanwhile, he maintained pressure on the Byzantine Empire, making it clear that their time was running out. Emperor Constantine III, the ruler of Constantinople, knew that the Ottomans were coming, but he had few options left. The once great Byzantine Empire had been reduced to little more than the the city itself, surrounded on all sides by Ottoman territory. By 1453, Mehmed's preparations were complete. He had gathered a massive army, equipped with the latest military technology, and positioned his forces for a final assault on Constantinople. It was a moment that Mehmed had been waiting for his entire life. He knew that the city's fall would not only secure his legacy, but would mark the beginning of a new era for the Ottoman Empire, a moment when the East would rise to claim what had long been the centre of the Christian world. As the drums of war echoed across the Bosporus and the walls of Constantinople loomed large on the horizon, Mehmed stood at the edge of destiny. He was no longer the young boy who had briefly tasted power, nor the student poring over maps and histories. He was a conqueror on the verge of the greatest victory of his life. The siege of Constantinople was about to begin, and with it, the future of the Ottoman Empire hung in the balance. The siege of Constantinople in 1453 was one of the most meticulously planned and executed military campaigns in history. Sultan Mehmed II, now fully in command of his empire and his vision, had prepared for this moment with painstaking detail. The city that had stood as the heart of the Byzantine Empire for over a millennium was about to face its final, most determined foe. Mehmed's ambition to conquer Constantinople had driven him to innovate in ways that would forever change the course of warfare. This was not just a military conquest, it was a turning point that would reshape the world. One of Mehmed's first strategic moves was the construction of Rumeli Hisari, an imposing fortress on the European side of the Bosporus. Its purpose was clear: to cut off Constantinople from any possible aid by sea. Positioned directly across from an existing Ottoman fortress on the Asian side, Rumeli Hisari allowed Mehmed to control the vital waterway and prevent reinforcements or supplies from reaching the beleaguered city. This chokehold was critical in ensuring that Constantinople, already isolated, would be starved into submission. As the Ottoman army gathered outside the city's walls, the stage was set for the final assault. But controlling the Bosporus was only part of Mehmed's grand strategy. The walls of Constantinople, especially the legendary Theodosian walls, were among the strongest defensive structures ever built. For centuries, they had repelled invaders, their massive stone fortifications standing as the ultimate bulwark against siege. Mehmed knew that to breach these walls, he would need more than conventional siege tactics. He needed to change the very nature of siege warfare. Enter Urban, a Hungarian engineer who had designed some of the most powerful cannons the world had ever seen. These cannons, capable of launching massive stone balls over a mile, would be the key to breaking through Constantinople's defences. With these weapons in place, Mehmed was ready to make history. As the siege began in early April 1453, Mehmed's forces surrounded the city by land and sea. The Ottomans established a naval blockade in the Golden Horn, the narrow inlet that separated Constantinople from its northern defences, while their army entrenched itself along the landward walls. For weeks the cannons relentlessly pounded the Theodosian walls, each deafening blast chipping away at the centuries-old stone. The defenders, led assaults, but the pressure was mounting and time was running out for the city. One of the most extraordinary moments of the siege came when Mehmed ordered his ships to be transported overland, a feat of engineering that caught the Byzantines by surprise. The Ottomans, unable to break the naval defences in the Golden Horn, devised a plan to bypass the blockade altogether. In a stunning display of ingenuity, Mehmed's forces hauled their ships across land, bypassing the defensive chains that stretched across the harbour. By launching his fleet into the Golden Horn from an unexpected direction, Mehmed struck a devastating blow to the city's morale and defences. The Byzantines were now surrounded on all sides, their options dwindling as the Ottoman noose tightened. For 7 long weeks, the city held on, but the relentless barrage from the Ottoman cannons had taken its toll. On May 29th, 1453, Mehmed launched the final assault. As dawn broke, the Ottoman forces surged forward in a coordinated attack, bombarding the weakened walls and pouring into the city. The decisive moment came when a small gate, known as the Kerkeporta, was left open, a fatal mistake that allowed the Ottomans to flood into the city. The defenders, exhausted and outnumbered, fought desperately, but the end was inevitable. Emperor Constantine, the last ruler of the Byzantine Empire, reportedly threw off his imperial regalia and fought alongside his soldiers, dying in the streets as his empire crumbled around him. By the end of the day, Constantinople had fallen. Roger Crowley in 1453, The Holy War for Constantinople, captures the magnitude of the moment. On the morning of May the 29th, 1453, the world changed as the city that had stood for over 1,000 years fell to the Ottomans. The fall of Constantinople marked the final death of the Byzantine Empire, ending the last vestiges of the Roman Empire that had once stretched across the known world. The significance of this event cannot be overstated. It was more than just the collapse of a city. It was the end of an era for Mehmed II. This victory was the crowning achievement of his life. The city he had dreamed of since his youth was now under his control, and with it, the Ottoman Empire was poised to dominate both East and West. Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, became the heart of the Ottoman world, a vibrant cosmopolitan city that would bridge 2 continents and 2 cultures. As Philip Mansell writes in Constantinople, city of the world's desire, the city was now the heart of the Ottoman world, the bridge between East and West. Mehmed wasted no time in making the city his own. He repopulated it with people from across his empire, ensuring that it would once again become a thriving centre of trade, culture, and political power. The fall of Constantinople had profound implications, not only for the Ottoman Empire, but for the entire world. It sent shockwaves through Europe, where the Christian kingdoms were left reeling from the loss of one of their most important strongholds. The city settled on the fallen city, Mehmed's focus turned to the future. The conquest of Constantinople had solidified his place in history, but it also opened new doors for the empire. The fall of the city marked the dawn of a new Ottoman era, one in which the empire would extend its influence even further, reshaping the political and cultural landscape of the Mediterranean and beyond. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was not just a military victory, it was a transformative moment that reshaped the Ottoman Empire and redefined its future. With the city's capture, Mehmed II realised a long-held dream, not only his own, but that of many Muslim rulers who had sought to conquer the legendary capital. Constantinople, the gateway between Europe and Asia, was now in Ottoman hands, and its fall marked the dawn of a new era for both the empire and the wider world. Under Mehmed's rule, Constantinople was swiftly transformed into Istanbul, the capital of a burgeoning empire that straddled two continents. Strategically, Istanbul became the crown jewel of the Ottoman Empire. Its location, commanding the Bosporus Strait, gave the Ottomans unprecedented control over trade routes between Europe and Asia. For centuries, the city had been a hub of commerce, a melting pot where goods, ideas, and cultures converged. Now, under Ottoman rule, its importance only grew. By controlling the Bosporus, the Ottomans could regulate the flow of goods from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, imposing tolls and taxes that enriched the empire. Istanbul became not just a political and military stronghold, but an economic engine that fueled the empire's further expansion. The city's position as a bridge between east and west allowed Mehmed to assert dominance over both land and sea, making Istanbul a key player in the global economy of the time. But the fall of Constantinople had far greater implications than just trade. It marked the unification of the Ottoman Empire, a state that had long been divided between its European and Asian territories. By capturing the city, Mehmed cemented his control over the entire empire, bringing together its diverse populations under one ruler and one capital. The city's fall also opened the door to further expansion into Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, and North Africa. No longer constrained by the Byzantine capital on its borders, the Ottoman Empire was free to expand outward, launching campaigns that would eventually bring vast new territories under its control. In the years that followed, Ottoman forces moved into the Balkans, seizing key cities and fortresses that would solidify their hold over the region. The conquest of Constantinople had given Mehmed the resources and strategic advantage to extend his influence across Eastern Europe. The psychological impact of the victory also played a crucial role. The fall of the great city sent shockwaves through Europe, where Christian powers had long seen Constantinople as a bulwark against Ottoman expansion. Now destiny. This achievement solidified his image as a heroic figure in the Muslim world, a ruler who had accomplished what many before him had attempted but failed. Jason Goodwin, in Lords of the Horizons, writes, "With the fall of Constantinople, Mehmed reshaped the fate of the Ottoman Empire, elevating it to a dominant world power. The conquest was seen as a victory for Islam, and Mehmed's reputation soared, not just among his subjects, but across the Muslim world. The cultural impact of the conquest was equally profound. Mehmed, ever the pragmatist, recognized that for Istanbul to flourish as his new capital, it needed to be repopulated and rebuilt. He encouraged people from all corners of the empire, Muslims, Christians, and Jews, to settle in the city, transforming it into a vibrant and cosmopolitan metropolis. The Hagia Sophia, the great church of Byzantine Christendom, was converted into a mosque, signalling the city's new identity as the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Yet Mehmed ensured that the city's diverse religious and cultural heritage was preserved, allowing it to become a symbol of the empire's tolerance and strength. Under Mehmed's guidance, Istanbul blossomed into one of the most important cities of the Renaissance world. He initiated a wave of construction, commissioning new mosques, palaces, schools, and public works that would define the skyline of the city for centuries. Istanbul became a centre of art, architecture, and learning, attracting scholars, poets, and thinkers from across the empire and beyond. The city's transformation from a decaying Byzantine relic into a thriving Ottoman capital was a testament to Mehmed's vision and determination. Yet, the impact of Constantinople's fall on the Ottoman Empire went beyond its immediate gains. It was a turning point that elevated the empire from a regional power to a global one. The conquest signalled the beginning of the empire's golden age, a period of expansion and cultural flourishing that would last for centuries. Istanbul became the heart of an empire that stretched from Hungary in the west to Persia in the east, from the Arabian Peninsula in the south to the Black Sea in the north. With Constantinople as its capital, the Ottoman Empire was poised to dominate not only the Mediterranean, but also the political and economic landscape of the world. Mehmed's success in capturing Constantinople cemented his legacy as one of the most visionary and ambitious rulers of his time. He had accomplished the unthinkable, and in doing so, he had forever altered the course of history. But Mehmed was not content to rest on his laurels. His conquest of the city was only the beginning of a reign that would be marked by sweeping reforms and an unrelenting drive to expand and modernize the empire. Mehmed II, celebrated as the conqueror for his dramatic capture of Constantinople, was far more than a brilliant military strategist. His true genius lay in his vision for the future of the Ottoman Empire. Once the dust had settled after the fall of Constantinople, Mehmed turned his focus inward, determined to transform his empire into a well-governed, culturally vibrant and resilient state that could withstand the pressures of both expansion and internal diversity. His reforms, both administrative and cultural, would lay the foundation for an empire that would dominate the Mediterranean and beyond for spanning continents and cultures, required a strong administrative core to hold it together. To achieve this, he reorganized the Ottoman governance structure, establishing a centralized bureaucracy that answered directly to the Sultan. This reorganization included the reform of the judicial system, ensuring that laws were applied uniformly across the empire, and restructuring the tax system, which not only increased the empire's revenue, but also made it more equitable for its diverse subjects. Mehmed's attention to detail and his focus on governance allowed the Ottoman state to function efficiently and sustainably, even as it grew in size and complexity. At the heart of Mehmed's vision was his belief in the strength of a multicultural empire. He welcomed people from all religious and ethnic backgrounds to live and thrive under Ottoman rule. Jews, Christians, and Muslims were all given the freedom to practice their faiths and contribute to the empire's economy and culture. This policy of tolerance was particularly evident in Istanbul, where Mehmed actively encouraged the settlement of different communities, understanding that the city's success depended on its diversity. By repopulating Istanbul with people from across the empire, Mehmed transformed the city into a cosmopolitan hub where different cultures coexisted and enriched one another. This cultural tolerance was not just an act of pragmatism, it was a key element of Mehmed's long-term strategy to create a stable and prosperous empire. By allowing religious and ethnic communities to govern themselves to a degree, while still being subject to Ottoman law, Mehmed fostered loyalty and cooperation. His empire became a sanctuary for many who faced persecution elsewhere, especially Jews who fled from Europe during times of conflict and oppression. Under Mehmed's rule, these communities found safety and opportunity, contributing to the economic and cultural vitality of the empire. Mehmed's vision for the Ottoman Empire also extended to the flourishing of arts, science, and architecture. He saw Istanbul not just as the political centre of his empire, but as a beacon of cultural and intellectual achievement. To this end, he commissioned the construction of grand mosques, palaces, and schools that would define the city's skyline and serve as centres of learning. The most famous of these was the Fatih Mosque, built on the site of the former Church of the Holy Apostles. The mosque became a symbol of the city's transformation from a Byzantine capital to the heart of the Ottoman Empire. But Mehmed's contributions to architecture went beyond mere symbolism. He recognised that a strong and lasting empire needed spaces for learning and growth. He established schools and universities that attracted scholars from across the Muslim world, turning Istanbul into a centre of intellectual life. Mehmed's patronage of the arts also contributed to the city's cultural renaissance. Poets, musicians, and artists flocked to his court, where they found an environment that encouraged creativity and innovation. Istanbul became a melting pot of ideas, where influences from the Islamic world, the Byzantine past, and even Renaissance Europe mingled freely. This cultural dynamism would come to define the Ottoman Empire during its golden age, and Mehmed's role in fostering it cannot be overstated. Militarily, Mehmed was relentless in ensuring the empire's strength. He restructured the army, refining the Janissary Corps and improving the empire's navy to secure control over the Mediterranean and Black Seas. His military reforms helped the Ottomans defend their borders and continue their expansion well after his death. Under Mehmed's rule, the Ottomans developed a disciplined and professional army that could adapt to new forms of warfare, making the empire a formidable force on land and sea. Mehmed's legacy as the conqueror extended far beyond his military victories. His reforms shaped the very structure of the empire, creating a multicultural, tolerant society that thrived on trade, culture, and intellectual growth. He recognized that conquest alone was not enough to build a lasting empire. Governance, culture, and diplomacy were just as crucial. His vision for Istanbul, not only as a political capital, but as a centre of learning and culture, ensured that the empire he built would endure long after his death. As Halil Inalcik wrote, Mehmed was not just a conqueror of lands, but of hearts, establishing a multicultural empire. His ability to unite diverse peoples under a single, cohesive state was one of his greatest achievements. Mehmed's reign laid the groundwork for what would become one of the most powerful empires in history, stretching from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from the shores of the Black Sea to the coasts of North Africa. The reforms Mehmed enacted, the cultural flourishing he encouraged, and the military strength he cultivated all combined to solidify his legacy as one of the greatest sultans in Ottoman history. His reign was a turning point, one that ensured the empire's survival and success for centuries to come. But the rise of the Ottoman Empire, driven by Mehmed's conquests and reforms, would not end with him. The empire was poised for even greater achievements, setting the stage for an era of expansion, power, and cultural brilliance that would shape the course of world history. The rise of the Ottoman Empire is one of the most remarkable stories in world history, a tale of ambition, strategy, and transformation that reshaped the political landscape of both Europe and the Middle East. From its humble beginnings as a small Turkish beylik in the hills of Anatolia, the Ottoman state evolved into a vast empire that would dominate 2 continents for centuries. It began with Osman I, the visionary leader who established the foundations of the Ottoman dynasty in 1299, forging a path for his descendants to follow. Under Osman's son, Orhan, the Ottomans expanded into key Byzantine territories, most notably capturing Bursa in 1326, which became their first major capital and a springboard for future conquests. The Ottoman rise continued with Murad, who led the empire into the Balkans and established Ottoman dominance in the region by taking control of Edirne, formerly Adrianople, in 1369. This strategic victory marked the beginning of the empire's European ambitions, as the city became the new Ottoman capital and a base for further expansion. Another critical moment came in 1354, when the Ottomans captured Gallipoli, giving them a crucial foothold in Europe and control over the vital Dardanelles Strait. This victory cemented their influence in the region and allowed them to project power It was Bayezid I who extended its reach further into the Balkans and Anatolia. However, it was the rise of Mehmed II that truly marked a turning point in the empire's trajectory. His successful siege and capture of Constantinople in 1453 were the culmination of centuries of Ottoman ambition. With the fall of the Byzantine capital, the Ottomans not only took one of the most important cities in the world, but they also declared the dawn of a new era. Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, became the heart of the Ottoman Empire and a symbol of its power and legacy. As Caroline Finkel observed in Osman's Dream, the rise of the Ottoman Empire reshaped the world, creating a legacy that still reverberates today. The geopolitical impact of the Ottoman Empire's rise was profound. In Europe, the Ottomans rapidly became the dominant power in Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean, challenging the Christian kingdoms that had long held sway over the region. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves through the courts of Europe, as the city's capture represented a seismic shift in the balance of power. The Ottomans now controlled the gateway between East and West, and their navy would soon dominate the Mediterranean, allowing them to influence trade and politics across the region. With Istanbul as their capital, the Ottomans were able to expand their empire further into the Balkans, Hungary, and eventually North Africa. In the Middle East, the rise of the Ottoman Empire had equally far-reaching consequences. The Ottomans positioned themselves as the defenders of Islam, particularly after the fall of Constantinople, which many in the Islamic world viewed as a fulfillment of prophecy. With the city in Ottoman hands, the empire became the most powerful Muslim state in the world, and Mehmed II's conquest elevated the Sultanate's status among Islamic rulers. The Ottomans would go on to incorporate large parts of the Arab world, including the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, into their empire, further solidifying their role as the protectors of the faith. Beyond the military and political victories, the Ottomans also played a key role in shaping trade routes between Europe and Asia. With their control of the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, they controlled access to the Silk Road and the spice trade, making Istanbul a critical hub for global commerce. The Ottomans' ability to bridge east and west allowed them to influence not only trade, but also culture, science, and art, fostering a rich, multicultural society that would thrive for centuries. Culturally, the rise of the Ottoman Empire represented a fusion of traditions. As the empire expanded, it absorbed the peoples and cultures of the regions it conquered, from the Balkans to the Middle East. This cultural diversity became a hallmark of the Ottoman state, particularly in Istanbul, where Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived side by side, contributing to the city's rich cultural tapestry. The Ottomans' tolerance for religious diversity and their promotion of trade and intellectual exchange helped create a society where different traditions coexisted, influencing everything from architecture to art and literature. The empire's impact on the Islamic world was equally significant. The Ottomans not only expanded the reach of Islam into Europe, but also revitalized the Islamic faith through their leadership. After the fall of Constantinople, they positioned themselves as the This gave the Ottomans immense religious authority, further legitimizing their rule and elevating their status in the Muslim world. The Ottomans also promoted Islamic learning and culture, funding religious schools and supporting scholars across their empire. The rise of the Ottoman Empire reshaped the political, economic, and cultural landscapes of both Europe and the Middle East. By the end of Mehmed's reign, the empire had established itself as a dominant world power, poised for further expansion and influence. Its ability to blend military might with cultural tolerance and economic prosperity allowed it to thrive, creating a legacy that would last for centuries. But the story of the Ottoman Empire was far from over. Mehmed II had laid the groundwork for future expansion, and the empire would continue to grow and evolve, reaching its zenith under later rulers. The legacy of Mehmed's reign and the empire's early conquests would pave the way for an era of unprecedented growth. As the Ottomans solidified their place as one of the most powerful and enduring empires in history. The story of the Ottoman Empire did not end with the fall of Constantinople. No, that was only the beginning. After Mehmed II, the conqueror, planted the Ottoman banner in the heart of Byzantium, the empire's future stretched out like the shimmering horizon of a vast, uncharted sea. Mehmed's victory was monumental, but the empire would rise to even greater heights under the rule of Suleiman the Magnificent. Suleiman wasn't merely a warrior. He was an architect of civilization, a man who dreamed not only of conquests, but also of creating a world that balanced power with culture, tradition with progress. Under his watchful gaze, the empire flourished like never before. Suleiman's reign would come to symbolize the golden age of the Ottoman Empire, an era when its reach extended across 3 continents. The empire surged into North Africa, casting its influence across the Mediterranean. It swept into Eastern Europe, its armies marching as far as Vienna, where the gates of Central Europe trembled before them. The Ottomans were not only conquerors, they were master diplomats, wielding treaties as skillfully as swords, ensuring their dominance was built not only through force, but also through strategic alliances. The empire's military campaigns were relentless, but they were not without purpose. Each conquest was a step towards securing key trade routes, access to precious resources, and above all, the prestige that came with being the most powerful empire of its time. However, it wasn't just the military might that made the Ottomans formidable. Behind the battle lines, far from the blood-soaked fields of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa, an internal transformation was taking place. This was a transformation that would lay the foundation for centuries of Ottoman rule. Suleiman, like Mehmed before him, recognized that the true strength of an empire lay not just in its ability to conquer, but in its ability to govern. The Ottoman administrative system became one of the most sophisticated in the world. Complex, yet efficient, it allowed for the smooth operation of an empire that ruled over diverse peoples, Christians, Muslims, Jews, who all yet adapted to the needs of a vast and varied population. Tax systems were refined, ensuring that the empire's coffers were always full, funding both further conquests and grand cultural projects. Under Suleiman, the empire became a cultural beacon. Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, was more than just the seat of power. It was the epicenter of a cultural renaissance. Architects, poets, scientists, and scholars flocked to the city. Great mosques rose, their domes and minarets piercing the sky, symbols of both spiritual devotion and imperial grandeur. The Ottomans became not just builders of empires, but builders of civilizations. And yet, through all of this, they remained deeply connected to their roots, to the traditions and customs that had given birth to the empire centuries earlier. As the empire expanded and thrived, it shaped the course of modern history. Its influence rippled across the globe, affecting trade, diplomacy, and even warfare. In Europe, the rise of the Ottomans forced kingdoms and empires to reconsider their strategies. The balance of power had shifted, and the world had to adapt. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire became the unifier, bringing together fragmented regions and establishing itself as the dominant Islamic power. The legacy of Ottoman rule in places like Egypt, Syria, and Iraq can still be felt today, where the echoes of that era reverberate in the politics and borders of the modern Middle East. But the empire's legacy is not just a matter of politics and power. It is also a cultural legacy. The Ottomans' embrace of multiculturalism allowed for the flourishing of diverse traditions within their borders. They were guardians of ancient knowledge, preservers of classical texts, and patrons of art and architecture. In many ways, the Ottoman Empire became a bridge between the ancient world and the modern era, carrying forward the achievements of the past while forging a new path into the future. And as with any great empire, the Ottoman story is one of both triumph and eventual decline. Yet, the rise of the Ottomans left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that remains visible even today. Their influence stretched far beyond the borders of their empire. They reshaped not only the map, but the very fabric of global history. And in doing so, they ensured that their legacy would endure long after the last Ottoman Sultan left the throne. As we come to the end of this journey through the rise of the Ottoman Empire, it's clear that their story is more than just a tale of battles and conquests. It's a story of visionaries like Mehmed II and Suleiman, who saw beyond the sword and sought to build something lasting, an empire that would stand the test of time. And though the empire would eventually fall, the impact of its rise and the legacies left in its wake continue to shape the world we live in today. So, thank you for joining me on this exploration of the rise of the Ottoman Empire. I hope this journey through history has been as enlightening for you as it has been for me. If you enjoyed this video and want more relaxing historical content, don't forget to subscribe to ASMR History, where I bring the stories of the past to life in soothing whispers. As historian Jason Goodwin so aptly put it, the Ottoman Empire, once a rising force, became an enduring world power, its legacy woven into the fabric of history.